Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Khara Plicanic, and I'm so glad that you are here joining me today for this not very snowy day in December. It is still December. This is so fun. So I'm glad that you could be here. This is what we're going to be making today. We are going to take a still photo, two still photos, a still photo of, in this case, some people and a dog, and a still photo of a snow overlay. And we're going to animate to make this. So it's going to be fun. And you don't have to animate it. I mean, I can just show you how to make add snow, but that's super easy. We don't need a whole live stream for that. But I am going to show you how to animate it. And we're actually, I don't know if you can tell in this tiny little preview, but we've got layers of snow. So there's a different layer behind our subjects and a faster, larger snow that's falling in front between the subjects and the camera. So we're getting fancy today. So here is kind of how this is going to play out. The steps that we're going to follow to make it snow. We are going to be using, just like I said, two still images, and they're both from Adobe Stock's free collection. So in the description below the video, I have links. I'm pretty sure I put it both in there. So you can, if you are a Creative Cloud subscriber, you can access and license and download the exact same files for free if you want to try and follow along. Um, so after we gather those images, the first step is going to be to crop to size. And the size is going to really matter with this whole thing because in order to make the snowfall seamlessly repeat, we have to be like pixel perfect on the size. So that is an important first step. We're also going to add some fog to the image in this case because I figured, you know what, if you are making it snow in a scene, you do kind of want it to have that foggy look. So maybe you're using a photo that was captured on a snowy day, so you might have it. But if you don't, I'm going to show you how to add some fog. Then we're going to set about building the seamless repeat of the snow, and then we'll animate it, and then I'll show you how to export everything. So with that, I'm popping in over here from the chat. This is so fun. I see some familiar faces and names in the chat, and we've got people tuning in from Bangladesh, Northern Ireland, Canada, France, Spain, Florida, and also just down the road from me here in Nebraska. So this is just really, really fun. As always, it is great to have everyone with us, and we'll pop in and take questions as we go to answer them here live. That's the beauty of being live. So, oh, we have somebody here from Iraq. So, how exciting! Just a fun global audience. It always blows me away. All right, let's get into it. So here is what will be our finished file. I just wanted to show you an overview of how this works because I think that it is helpful, especially when it comes to animating. People tend to freak out a little bit because typically when we are working in Photoshop, we're not dealing with animation and time and all of that. And so it can be a little bit like, what? What's happening? So I thought maybe if I show you the finished file first so you know where we're going, then it will make more sense. So we'll get here, but right now what I have on my screen is our finished completed timeline, right? So just like later, if you want to rewatch this recording of this live session, there will be a playhead along the bottom and you can skip around and fast forward and go back and forth. And as you move forward, in time, the playhead moves. And that's the same idea here in Photoshop, even though these are all just still images. So you'll notice that there's a play button right over here. And if I click on it, the image plays, the recording plays. And this particular recording is just 2 seconds long. So you can see it's going and looping around and starting over again. And it is seamless if we just look at the top part. And that's what we're going to be carefully building today. But I want to show you what's really happening because you might be like, how are we making snow move in Photoshop? So let me just pause this for a minute and I'm going to zoom way out because I want you to see what's happening. So down below in our timeline, each little line here is one of our layers. And we're not animating in the sense of like a full-blown Pixar production, right? We are just basically taking our layers in Photoshop and we're just telling Photoshop where we want the layer to be at a given moment in time. And we do that with keyframes, as we'll see. It's so easy, I promise. So I just want to show you what's happening. So to do that, I'm going to turn on my show transform tools so you can see how we are moving. So right now I have selected the back layer of snow that's behind our subject. And so, for example, if I drag the playhead back to the beginning, you can see that the snow image that I made is twice as big as the canvas. So this is where that size comes into play. So you can see that at the beginning of the animation, that layer, which is just a JPEG or whatever, it's just a layer. There's nothing magical about it. But it does have a seamless repeat built into it. So the layer starts at the top, right? And now if I move the playhead like to the middle-ish, you can see that that has moved down. And by the time we get to the end of the timeline, when I let go, you can see that the layer is now at the bottom. So that's all that's happening when we quote animate the snow is we're just taking that layer and we're telling it to start up at the top here. And then we're telling it to end at the bottom. So it's just literally moving down. And then it will repeat by jumping back to the top and coming down again. And because it's seamless, it is not noticeable. So I hope that helps kind of just explain where we're going. And the reason it has to be twice as big, obviously, is if it was exactly the size of the canvas, as it moved down, it would just be empty. And then it would be like snowing, not snowing, snowing, not snowing, and it would be weird. So this is where we are headed with this today. I don't think when I play it, yeah, it doesn't animate the box around the layer as it's moving, but you can see it. If we jump to the beginning, you can see it's mostly at the top. And when we jump to the end, it is now the extra is at the bottom. So that's what we're going to be creating today. So let's get started. I'm going to close this timeline panel because I just hate it being on my screen most of the time. So I'm going to show you how we get that later. But first, let's just start by cropping these two images to the size we want. And, if you weren't going to animate this, if you were going to print it, then you'd want a larger file. If you were gonna animate this and you were wanting to put it on a big TV or something, then you'd want a larger like HD value. I'm gonna animate this to a very small file because I just want it to be not crashing my machine or causing any trouble while I'm also live streaming. I'm asking a lot of my laptop here, so I'm gonna make it small. But you want to keep the size in mind because what you export would be pretty large. That's another reason why I've made this animation only 2 seconds long, is that just cuts down on the overall file size and it works for this particular piece. All right, so let's start this out by grabbing the crop tool, and you'll notice that for my crop tool settings, I have come up here. And it's not, there we go. Nope. I thought I could zoom in on it for you. It's not working today for some reason. But I've got the setting up here set to ratio. That'll work, right? Let's see. Nope. I have it set to width, height, and resolution, but I'm going to leave the resolution blank and that'll make sense in a minute. But I'm putting in values of 800 pixels for the width and 532 pixels for the height. I'm leaving the resolution blank. There it is. Now I can zoom in, right? So 800 by 532 blank resolution. And this is a key thing. We want to make sure we delete the cropped pixels. When I was trying to figure out how to make this work, I did not have that option on and it was not working and I couldn't figure out why until I realized that it was screwing up the offset for the seamless repeating. So we definitely want to make sure we are deleting our cropped pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and crop this. So now it gets very tiny on my screen because I've made it very tiny. So I'll press Command or Control and the number 0 to fit it back on my screen. And now we want to do the same thing to our snow image. So that is right here. And I've got the same crop tool settings and I'll just go ahead and crop it. And again, I'll press Command or Control 0 to fit it back on my screen. All right, woo, that was easy. Now we are working with apples and apples, right? Instead of who knows what, a mismatch of image sizes. All right, so let's go over here. And the next thing we're gonna do is create that fog that we may or may not want depending on your image. Obviously, to make this look a little more realistic, it's nice to have a scene that looks wintry and maybe has some snow in it. Otherwise, no matter how great your Photoshop skills are, it's going to look like you just added snow in Photoshop. So you want to start with that. And then I'm going to create a new blank image and I'm just going to fill it with black. So I'll choose Edit, Fill, and I'll set black for the contents. And now we're going to just run a filter to add some clouds. So I'm going to choose Filter, Render, Difference Clouds. And now we get some foggy looking stuff. And just to make it a little softer, I'm going to run a blur. So we'll choose Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And then, you pick a value that looks good to you. So I don't know, 20 something, depends on what the value that you choose here is really going to depend on what size you are cropping your image to. But I'm going to go with, looks like almost 15 pixels. And we'll change the blend mode to screen. And I'm going to dial the opacity down. Obviously, we don't want too much fog, but maybe something like that. And then I'm going to rename this layer by double clicking on it and typing fog. And I spelled it right. Good. I thought I had a typo in there. All right, so that is perfect. Now let's transfer back over to our snow scene over here. And the next thing that we want to do is we need to set this up so that it can repeat seamlessly. Okay, and that sounds complicated, but it's so easy. All we need to do is run the offset filter. So we're going to choose Filter, Other, Offset. And the way that this works is right now we understand in our minds that the seam would happen if we took this canvas as it is and we made a copy of it above itself. The seam would be, in the center where the two canvases meet. So to prevent that, what we're going to do before we duplicate this is we're going to shift the seam to the middle of the canvas, which is what this offset filter is going to do. And that allows us to get rid of it or to disguise it, basically. And by shifting the seam to the middle and then hiding it, we can now stack the image on top of itself and it won't have any seams. So you'll see in a second. So we'll choose offset. And because we're going to be duplicating this vertically, we want to move the scene vertically to exactly half of the height of the image. So our image height is 532 pixels. So if you know that in your head, you can divide that and get 266, or we could just type 532 slash for divided by 2. And then when we hit tab, Photoshop does the math for us. That's like one of my favorite features in Photoshop. So we're having the vertical offset, okay? So we're not shifting the horizontal. And all that's doing is it's basically cutting the image in half, and then or it's kind of like scooting the image halfway down, cutting off the overhang and putting the overhang at the top. So now what is actually already seamless is the top up here seamlessly matches the bottom, and that edge, instead of being at the bottom of the document where we couldn't really work with it, it's now in the middle here. And it's hard to see because it's pretty seamless already, but you can see like right here, this is cut off. So there's a line now. So all we've done is shift the seam to the middle where we can now get rid of it. So I'm going to click OK. So we've offset the image and we have that line. Then I'm just going to use the marquee tool to make a little selection around that seam. And where's my smart guides? There it is. So I can see I've gone a little bit in both directions on either side of that seam so that we are giving Photoshop something to work with. And now I'm going to try to run Gen Fill, but you'll see that I can't. And if I click on this, it's going to tell me that basically I can't do it because this image comes from Adobe Stock. It comes in grayscale mode, which apparently generative fill can't work in grayscale mode. So that's okay because it's really easy to fix. We're just going to come up to the image menu and choose mode and then RGB color. Those are all good things to know because when you do this on your own, that could really trip you up. So simple fix, got to change it to RGB color. And now from my contextual taskbar here, if you don't see this, you can get it from the window menu by choosing window, contextual taskbar. So I've already got it open and I'm just going to click generative fill and I'm going to leave the prompt totally blank and I'll just click generate. And now Photoshop, you can see it running over here. It is just processing this image and deciding how to best fill in that area. And so I'm going to zoom back a little bit. Maybe here. There you can see. So the line is now gone. And in the properties panel, we can choose one of 3 variations of whatever solution we think looks the best. I don't know. I kind of like number 3. They're all pretty imperceptible. So either one is fine. All right. Before we move on then, I'm going to take this layer that Photoshop generated when we generated that fill to get rid of the seam. Photoshop put that generation in a new layer. So you can see if I hide it, there's the seam again. And then if I turn it back on, the seam is gone. So what we want to do is now merge this Band-Aid basically into the actual layer. So I'm going to press Command or Control E to merge it down. And now it's just part of the background layer. And the next thing we're going to do is extend the canvas so we can double our image, the height of our image. And to do that most easily so you can really see what's happening, I'm going to convert this from a locked background layer to just a regular working layer. And the way that we do that is just by clicking on the little lock icon. And that way we can now have transparency so you can just kind of better see what's happening. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And now we are ready to extend the canvas. So we're going to basically build the foundation where we can copy this layer. So to do that, we're going to come to the image menu. And you may be familiar already with the image size, but this time what we want is actually canvas size. So I'm going to click on canvas size. And we are going to change this. Instead of worrying about pixels and trying to think like, what's 532 pixels for the height? What is 2 times that? We could, of course, just type ×2 in here and it would calculate it for us. But maybe that's even too much work. So what we're going to do I have that right? 532. Yeah. What we're going to do instead is instead of working in pixels, we're going to work in percent. And we're going to make sure relative is not checked. And I'm going to say that I want the height to be 200% of what it started with. And I want it to grow from the bottom upwards. So when we click OK, this is what happens. So we've now taken our image that was 532 pixels. We've increased it by 200%. So that makes the height now double. So 1064. And we didn't have to do any math. Love that. Okay. Next, we're ready to duplicate this layer. So I'm just going to press Command or Control J to make a copy. So we see now we have 2 layers in our layers panel. And I'm going to grab the move tool and just drag it straight up. And look at that. There's no seam. Because remember, we moved the seam to the middle, which made the edges seamless. Then we hid the seam in the middle, or the seam. And now by duplicating it, we have just a seamless tile. We could make this however many tiles tall that we want, which we will do later. And the whole thing is seamless. It's incredible. All right, so the next thing we need to do is merge it back down. So I'm again pressing Command or Control E, and that is it. So the next thing that we will do is copy this. So I'm going to press Command or Control A to put marching ants around everything, Command or Control C to copy it, and now we're going to bring it over here to our image and press Command or Control V to paste. And there it is. But you can see, if I grab the move tool and I turn on my transform options, you can see that it pasted basically in the position where we want it to end at the end of the animation. So just for, I don't know, our mental clarity's sake, I'm just going to click and I'm holding shift so that it just goes straight up, and I'm going to drag it up. And this is, pretty important that you really make sure it's snapping to the edge, because even if it's like a pixel off, you might see a jump in the seamless repeat of that animation. So if you follow along or you do this in your own images later and you notice a jump, this could be why, is it might just not be quite lined up. All right, before we keep moving, let's pop into the chat, see how everybody is doing. Zoran is here. Imsirajic from Serbia. Imsirajic. I think I'm saying that right. My husband is from Bosnia, so I know how the itchy, I say we have itchy endings to our names. That's so fun. Oh, Fred. Fred says 8 minutes in and I've learned something new. I love it, Fred. And now I'm curious what the thing was. Sarah, thank you for doing this. You are so welcome. Thank you for being here. This is great. Hello from Washington State, Rochelle. Glad you could join us. This is so fun. So awesome. I guess not too many questions yet. That's okay. That's good. All right. So I think what we'll do is pop back over and we'll animate this with just the one snow. And then we'll go back and kind of level it up with the background, with the faster snow. That'll actually be the foreground. Yes. All right. So let's do that. So let's pop back over to the desktop here, and let's animate this. Okay. So, first let's let's change the blend mode so we can see our people. How about that? So from normal, we want to switch the blend mode to screen, because it's not going to help us if we animate it and we can't see our people. All right, so we'll just leave it in front of the people for now, just so you can see how this works. And now we're ready to open up our timeline. So from the window menu, we would choose timeline. And there's nothing in it yet. There is a button in the middle, and it either says one of two things. It either says create video timeline or create frame animation. And in this case, what we want is a video timeline because we're taking advantage of the keyframes that Photoshop offers in the video timeline. So you want to make sure you have that selected, and then your button will say create video timeline, and then you just click on it. And nothing really happens other than we get a timeline now, and you can see that there's a timeline for each layer. And by default, the timeline is 5 seconds long, which is just kind of a lot to deal with. So I'm going to drag that back. So this little grabber thing on the top um, is kind of like the endpoint for the timeline. So I just want to set it here, but I think we still I'm not sure if it'll automatically stop there or if we have to drag the layers back too, but I'm going to do that. So basically, the timeline shows which layers are visible at any point during time. And I want time to end right here at 2 seconds. And so I'm just making these layers also end at 2 seconds. Some other things we want to do in the timeline before we get too far is come over to this little cog wheel right here. And if we click on that, there is an option to loop playback. So we want to make sure that's enabled because otherwise it will just play and stop. And then you'd have to hit play again and it would repeat, but it makes it really hard to see if your animation is actually seamless. So you want to make sure you turn on loop playback. Again, that is from the little cogwheel right there. Of course, now if we hit play, nothing happens. The timeline goes and just keeps repeating, but we haven't actually animated anything yet. So doing so is so simple. You guys are going to feel so fancy. Um, we want to make sure two things. We want to make sure that the snow layer is selected in the layers panel, not the fog layer. So select the snow layer. You can also do that by clicking down here in the timeline. So you'll notice if I click on the fog layer in the timeline, it selects the fog layer in the layers panel. If I click the layer 1, which is the snow, which we'll rename in a minute, you'll notice that it changes the focus also in the layers panel. So we want to make sure we're on the snow layer. And we want to make sure the head of the timeline is the playhead is at the beginning. And we want to make sure that our layer is positioned where we want it to be. So in this case, remember that our snow is twice as tall as our canvas. And we want it positioned so that the extra, the overhang, is above because as we move through time, it's going to move down. All right, so we're on the right layer, the playhead's in the right place at the beginning, and our layer's in the right physical position. Now we're going to add 2 keyframes. It's so simple. To get to them, we need to twirl open here where it says layer 1, which is the snow. We need to twirl it open by clicking this little caret, and that gives us access to these 3 properties that we can keyframe in Photoshop. So that little stopwatch icon to the left here, it's supposed to be a stopwatch. That's what that represents. Those are our keyframes that we can add to position, opacity, or style. In this case, what we are animating, the property we're animating is the position. And we do that by telling Photoshop, hey, pay attention, add a keyframe to this point in the timeline. So we do that by simply clicking on the little stopwatch next to the word position. And when I do that, this happens. This little yellow diamond shows up on the timeline. So what we've done is we've said, hey, Photoshop, at this point in the timeline, when the playhead is at the beginning, we want this layer, layer 1, in this position, this key position at this key moment in time is marked with what we call a keyframe. Now, we just need to tell Photoshop where we want the snow to be at the end of the animation. So we're going to take the playhead and we're going to drag it to the end of the animation. And because we've turned on keyframes, Photoshop is like tracking the position of this layer now. So all we need to do, I'm just zooming out so we can see here. All we need to do is use the move tool to drag this layer. And again, I'm being very careful to see that it's snapping. Drag it where we want the position to be at the end of the animation. And guess what? Photoshop added another diamond. And you can see that they're kind of like a pair. So we have a diamond here and a diamond here. And that tells Photoshop we want the layer at the top in the beginning, and then we're going to move it down at the end. And Photoshop will figure out all of the in between. We don't have to worry about that. We just tell it where we want it to start and where we want it to end. And that is it. And now check it out. Now, if we come up here and I just hit play, there is our falling snow. And it's just going to repeat seamlessly over and over and over. Isn't that cool? So simple to animate, right? Okay, so let's take a look over at the chat now and see what questions you guys have. Oh, oh, that's nice. Janice says that this is such a clear explanation and she's taking notes. I'm glad you find it clear and helpful. It's fun because I really like teaching, and it's also when you teach stuff, it really makes you have to learn it really clearly so that you can explain it clearly. So I'm glad that I'm able to do that for people. All right. Well, if you have questions as we go ahead and put them in the chat. All right. So now that's the basis of this, right? So if this is all you want, perfect. You're done. Congratulations. Seamless animation. Now, because I looked at this and I was like, well, yeah, but all we did was take this and slap it on top and move, make it move. And it is great and I like it. But we can also add a little bit of extra oomph to this, and that's what we're going to do next by taking this snow that we've already done, and we're going to make it like the background snow, and we'll make a new snow layer for the front. So in the layers panel, I'm going to rename this and we're going to call it snow behind, I guess, snow behind. And now we need to mask it so that it does not show up in front of our subjects. So to do that, I'm going to hide these layers for a moment by just clicking the little eyeballs here. I'm going to target the background layer. I'm going to press W for my wizard-like selection tools that have some sort of auto component to them, right? And by pressing W and getting any one of these wizard selection tools here, that gives us access to the button at the top that says select subject. So now I'm just going to click select subject and Photoshop selects it. I'm so lazy now. Like now if Photoshop doesn't just do it perfectly, I'm like, oh man, I have to like work on this. How spoiled we have become, right? So it selects our subject, and now I can go back to enable the two visibility icons for the other two layers. We'll click to target the snow layer. And now I want to add a mask, but I don't want to hide everything else. I want to hide what's inside the selection. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option when I click the add a mask button. I don't know if you can see that down there. It might be buried by screen controls for you, but the little button at the bottom of the layers panel that looks like a camera, if you option or alt click on that button while you have an active selection, it will hide the contents of the selection. And in this case, that's what we want. We want to hide the snow from the area where the subjects are. And that's what a mask does. So you can see in the thumbnail here, the subjects that were selected are now filled with black in this area, and the background is still white, which means if I come over here, oh, and other important key tip, we need to unlink the mask, right? So just like a mask on Halloween hides your face or not, it hides parts of your face and then there's like cutouts for your eyes maybe. That's just what this is doing. So the black areas are hiding or blocking this layer from showing, and the white layers are letting that area show. The link means that as this layer moves, the mask would move with it, which would be super weird if we animate it because, oh, it's not interesting. Maybe it's not doing it, or maybe it can't animate the mask. I've always just preemptively unlinked it, but maybe you don't have to. That's so interesting. So anyway, you would unlink it by clicking in this area where the link is. Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't make a difference. So I guess the animation and the keyframes and all of that just ignores the mask. But that's a bummer because maybe you want it to move with it. That will take further investigating. But I'm going to just unlink it because it makes me feel better. But that allows you to move the mask independently from the layer. So like this, you see what's happening on my screen right now? I'm moving the mask, but not the layer. Or I could move the layer, but not the mask. Um, and that's what's happening. And you can always tell, by the way, which item you've got selected by which one is highlighted. So you can see a white outline around the thumbnail right now. So that tells me the actual layer is selected. Whereas if I click on the mask, now the mask within the layer is selected. So anyway, point being, we now have a mask. It's hiding the snow so that it looks like it's behind our subjects. We have unlinked it, even though apparently we didn't have to, but I wonder if that's a setting somewhere, like a preference that I just haven't noticed before. But I'm going to leave it unlinked. And that's it. Now, if we play this, the snow falls behind them, which is pretty, but obviously like weird. It should also be falling in front of them. But if there was snow falling in front of them, it would appear larger to us, right? As it would be closer to the camera. It would also appear to be falling faster because that's how things work, right? That's why airplanes way far away look like they're moving slowly, even though they're moving very fast. So we are going to create that same illusion by remaking a new snow seamless overlay to go in the front of our subjects. So I'm going to go back to my snow image here. And this is what took me a long time to figure out, because when I'm teaching animation, let's talk about this for a second. First of all, I'm not an animator. I don't consider myself an animator. So if you're sitting here going, I don't know anything about animation, that's okay. I barely know a lot about animation, barely know much about animation. But when I have taught similar things in Photoshop, people often say, well, how could I make this move slower or faster? And it's kind of a brain warpy thing, but the speed at which something moves is a result of the distance it's covering in a given amount of time, right? I mean, we know that, but like if you had to put it in words, it might be tricky. So, speed equals distance over time. So when it comes to making things move in video or in an animation like this, you speed it up by either having it move the same distance in less time or making it move a greater distance in the same amount of time. And so this is the solution that I came up with for how to pull this off. And it was kind of mind warpy, but maybe there's a different way of doing it. If you know of one, I'd love to hear it. But this is what I came up with. But it's going to require us to just like redo the snow completely. So we're not going to just take the file that we have and edit it. We're going to go back to the original stock file and do it again from scratch, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to come up here and revert this file. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to choose Revert. So now I'm back with my full size image, which measures, I mean, it's gigantic. It's 5,000 pixels across. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, which is I'm going to crop it to that same 800 by 532 pixels. However, we're going to do what I call death by cropping. And it's okay because this is such a high res image, and I'm ultimately sizing it for a very low res image. So here's what I mean by death by cropping. We are going to this time crop in like this. See what I'm doing? This is what I call death by cropping. So instead of cropping like full frame like this and just resizing it, maybe trimming the edge, we're like death by cropping. And I can't enlarge it and do all this at the same time because I'm holding Option or Alt to scale all sides of the crop box at once, and I'm holding my trackpad. So I can't enlarge anything else at this moment. But if you can see to the right of my cursor, there's a little info display. So it's showing me what like size within this 5,000 pixel image I'm currently at. So you can see it's showing a width of like 1,300 and a height of 800 something. So we know that the document we're putting this in was only 532 pixels tall. So as long as I'm not cropping this like this tiny, then we're going to be fine. And it's going to be like blurred and moving really fast anyway. But I think that I calculated something like I wanted to have this down to maybe, what did I say? I don't know. Oh, probably about like maybe 800 pixels height. So I have plenty of resolution to pull this off. That's the point here. All right, so something like this, okay? Now, we're going to still make sure that delete cropped pixels is on. This is where I was getting really confused when it wasn't working previously. All right, now I'm going to crop this. Ready? Boom. And I'll enlarge it, just zooming it on my screen by pressing Command or Control and then number 0. All right, so this is our snow for the up close stuff. So we cropped in to make the snowflakes larger within the frame that we're cropping it to. And we could do that because we had a giant image to work with. And I was watching in the little info readout to make sure that we were not calling on the pixel fairy, as I like to say, to generate pixels out of thin air in order to end up with this result. And even if we did, who cares really, because it's just blurry snow. So it would have been fine. But for those of you who are sticklers for that, now you know. Okay. I hope that you still consider this a clear explanation, Janice. If this part gets a little bit hairy. Okay. And now we repeat the same thing as we did before. So we are going to do, let me just make sure I'm not doing anything totally wrong that I have to back out of later. All right, so we do the same thing. So this is good review. So we're going to do filter, other, offset. Okay, we're going to move that seam. And it should, again, land with the same settings. So we cropped it to the same size, ultimately. So half of the height is still 266 pixels, which puts our seam smack in the middle. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting some crud here. All right, so we'll go ahead and click OK. Then we're going to get rid of the seam by grabbing, in this case, my marquee tool. So I'm pressing the letter M for marquee. And now it's kind of a bigger mess, right? The seam, because now the snowflakes are bigger within the frame. So that seam is more disruptive. So I think I might make a larger selection to give Photoshop a little more room to work its magic. And again, I can't choose generative fill because I just reverted this file, right? And remember, it came to us in grayscale mode. So we've got to convert it again. So we'll choose image, mode, RGB color. And in that contextual taskbar that can be found from the window menu, contextual taskbar, I'm going to click generative fill, and then I'm going to leave the prompt blank and just click generate. And now we cross our fingers and hope it doesn't do anything wacky, which happens sometimes, but usually not in an image like this. Look at that. Seam gone. Poof. Magic. And in our properties panel, we have 3 different solutions. Ooh, I like this one. This one's a little bit empty, so I like that this one filled it in. Oh, that's good too. But maybe I don't know. I think I'm going to go with this middle option. All right, so here is the fix, right? So if I hide it, there's our seam. If I enable it, our fix shows up now. That generated solution that Photoshop made is in the layers panel. And now we need to merge it down. So I'll press Command or Control E. And in preparation for elongating our canvas, I'm going to convert the locked background layer to a working layer that is capable of transparency by clicking on the little padlock there. That will convert it from a background. Now it'll say layer 0. And now I'll minimize my timeline here. Now we're going to increase the canvas. But here's where things are different. Another way is that instead of just doubling the canvas, if we want it to move faster, we need to give it more distance to cover. And the way that we do that is by elongating the canvas. So right now, if we did this, we would have bigger flakes, and that would be nice, but they would be falling at the same speed. So I've been experimenting with this, and quite honestly, I'm shocked at what I could get away with. And so we are going to expand the canvas, not by doubling it, but we're going to make it 600% bigger. So we're going to go back to image menu, and we're going to choose canvas size. And again, we're going to change from pixels to percent. We're going to not check the option for relative. And for height, I'm going to type 600%, and we're going to make it grow again from the bottom. And I'll click OK. And now we have a very tall canvas, right? And so now I'm just going to duplicate that seamless tile a bunch of times. So we'll do it once and move it up, duplicate that and move it up. So I'm pressing Command or Control J to duplicate it. Whoops, hitting the wrong button. That's always great. Love it. Love it when that happens. And one more time here. Okay, now it is seamless. As we can see, there are no seams, but obviously we can see like the repetition of it. However, it does not make a difference in the animation. So let's merge all of this down. So I've got this top layer selected. I'm going to hold the Shift key and click the bottom layer. So they're all selected. And then I'll press Command or Control on a PC and the letter E to eat them up. So they're all in one layer. And that's it. Now we're going to select all, Command or Control A, which you can't see because this is on. So we've got our marching ants. Command or Control C to copy. And now let's go back over here and Command or Control V to paste. I'm going to zoom out so we can see, and I'll turn back on my transform controls so you can see where it landed. And again, we want to move it all the way up so that the extra is hanging off at the top of the canvas. And now let's take a look at our timeline a little bit more. And let's rename this layer. So I'm going to call this Snow Front. So you just double click right on the name and you can just give it a new one. So I've got that renamed. And now a couple other things we got to look at in our timeline panel. Photoshop always does this. It drops in any new layers that you create or that it creates. In this case, when we pasted it in, Photoshop created a new layer. And because my playhead happened to be here, it added that layer at this point in time. So remember that if this is like a video and we reverse it and we were to watch this through, you'll notice in the image that's micro right now, we don't see this layer until the playhead hits it and then it turns on. So what we want to do is drag this to the beginning of the timeline so it will play with all the other things at the beginning. And you'll notice that this one has bumped all the way out to 5 seconds again because that's the default timeline length in Photoshop. Because obviously when you're animating things in Photoshop, you're not trying to make a feature length film, right? You do short little like web animations and little stuff like that. So 5 seconds is a nice amount of time, but I don't even want that. So I'm going to drag this back to, and you'll see now it's dragging the little stopper with it. So that's nice. So we've added this layer in. We need to move it to the beginning of the timeline and then shorten it up because 2 seconds is enough, and that'll save us on file size when we export this. All right. We've got it in position. Now we need to change the blend mode to, again, screen, which will just hide the black and leave the white so we see the snowflakes. And before we animate it, we want to make sure we're on the right layer. We want to make sure the time playhead is at the beginning of the timeline. We want to make sure this layer is in the position that we want it to be at the beginning of time. And now we're ready to add the keyframe. So again, we're going to come down here to the snow front layer and we're going to access the keyframe options by twirling down that little caret. And we see again the 3 properties that we could animate. And because we want to animate position, we're going to click the little stopwatch next to position. That adds this little yellow keyframe to the timeline. Now, to automatically create the keyframe for the end of the timeline, we're going to drag the playhead to the end of the timeline. And the reason there's no keyframe there right now is because the position has not yet changed. So now I'm going to grab my move tool and drag this down. Whoops. Quite frankly, I need more space on my screen. All right, we'll drag this down. This is a long, where's the top of it? There it is. Okay, so now, see that? That's why I zoomed out. Normally I wouldn't do it when I'm working like this, but I want you to see. So it's hard. It's hard to really understand what's happening if you can't see where this is and where it's going. Right? And because now that position has changed, Photoshop has added the keyframe here. And it tracks it. So if I decide, oh, I want this to be the end, then this becomes the keyframe. But we want, and now I've undone it, we want this keyframe right there. So it automatically adds that next keyframe because it notices that the position has shifted. Now we can zoom in on it. All right. Are we ready to see if it worked? Let me see what questions we have first. Let's jump to the chat and have a look. Um, what, okay, so Joyous Design and Gift says, so what is size or time you recommend for including it in an email? Great question. As small as possible. So I sent out an email to my list when I was letting people know about this for Creative Pro, and I did, I think it was 600 pixels. So 6 or 8, one of those is plenty for an email. Um and this is why I've made this animation only 2 seconds, because the file size, even just to give you an idea, file size for an animated GIF, in this case, this animated GIF, only being 2 seconds long, was still like 15 megs or something crazy. So I'll show you how you see all of that and how you work with it. But yeah, as tiny as possible is what we want to do. And let's see. That was a great question. Oh, yes. So Sudhir is asking, is this going to be recorded? Yes, that's the beauty of YouTube. So we're live right now, and then when we're done, it just lives on YouTube, and you can come back and rewatch this as much as you want. Cindy had the same question, so yes. And Fred says 30 minutes in and I've learned something. I assume you're talking about the linking of the mask. And basically, I guess I didn't realize Photoshop seems to ignore whether a mask is linked or not when animating. I I didn't know that. I've just assumed that it wouldn't, because obviously there's times when you would want it to be linked. So I'm kind of surprised. So I'll have to look into that and figure out if there's another way that that can be controlled somewhere. So, oh, and happily, Janice says the explanation is still very clear. So love it. And Cool Kitchen says, I didn't know that Photoshop had this tool. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize you can animate in Photoshop, which is perfect for like those of us who like want to dabble in animation, but we're not like ready to dive into After Effects. So I've been getting more and more comfortable with After Effects, barely. But that is in large part due to my comfort of working with animation in Photoshop. So this could be a gateway for people who are curious about it. All right. Great stuff. Let's now we have to see if this works, and then cross our fingers that it will be seamless, because otherwise it's just really embarrassing when I do that on camera, which guess what? Happens all the time. Go back and watch last month's live stream, where instead of making the peace sign the peace sign that I thought I was making, I ended up unwittingly making the Mercedes logo. But you all caught me and set me straight, so thank you. Clearly, we need to see more peace signs in the world. All right, so let's hit play. Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? Okay, there it goes. Oh, thank goodness, and it is seamless. So I'm gonna drag my timeline down so we can make it a little. There we go. We can see it a little better. Make it like bigger. Yay, look at that. So you can see that it's just looping. And isn't it kind of amazing? I don't know about you guys, but it blew me away when I was trying to figure out like how really extra big did I need to make the front snow so that it would be moving faster. And at first I tried like just making it, 300 or 400%. And then I was like, it still doesn't feel like it's moving very fast. Um, and so I did 600, and I'm like, that seems to be working. Maybe it's moving so fast that it appears just at the right speed. Maybe like 400, 5 would have been, I don't know. I don't know. It hurts my brain when I was figuring all of that out. So I would be curious if any of my actual motion designer friends who live and breathe this stuff, if they would have done this differently, I don't know. I should have consulted them, but I didn't. So stay tuned, I guess. Maybe they're going to be like, Khara, there's a way simpler way, but I don't know. I think this is it, right? So it's um the speed is time over distance. So in order to make these two different animated elements coexist in a single document where, the time has to be the same for both of them, this was my solution. So we'll see uh how that goes. But I feel like it just looks so much better having the multiple layers of snow and moving at different speeds and the front snow being larger, the flakes. I just feel like that is really key to pulling this off and not just looking like a cheesy filter or something. So, I'm glad it worked. That is great. And I wasn't like a pixel off somewhere or something embarrassing. So let me show you now how we export all of this, right? So you can save your work and get it out of Photoshop. So first thing you want to do is save this document as a PSD, of course, right? Because if you want to come back to this later and throw in a different image or whatever, you don't want to have to start over. So we would choose File, Save As, and I'll put it in my Creative Pro folder here, and we'll just call it Let It Snow. And we want to make sure for format we're choosing Photoshop. Okay, so whew, now this is saved, and it will save, yes, the timeline and the keyframes, everything just as it is. That's the beauty of a Photoshop document. It's the native format. But of course, if you want to be able to put this in an email, or you know what? Um, oh, I was just gonna ruin a surprise for somebody, but so I'm not going to say. But if you wanted to add this to a digital frame, I don't know. I assume that they would play a GIF or an MP4. So you don't want to send a PSD to those digital frames that so many people love. You would want to send either a GIF or an MP4. I don't know yet because I don't have one. But let me show you how you would do that. So to save this as an MP4, so simple. You just come over to the panel menu on the timeline and you choose, oh my gosh, I can't see. Render video. I have to enlarge this just for my own seeing, even with glasses. All right, so we would choose render video. It's going to chew on it for a minute. Okay, so don't let this thing scare you. You give it a name. You choose a folder where you want it to save. Um, I'll put it, well, let me choose. Am I going to really do this? Yes, we'll really do it. Videos, live streams. Should just have put it on my desktop. That's okay. So I'm choosing a folder. We'll call it Let It Snow. You'll notice MP4 is the format. Here are all the different settings we can choose for it. Basically, I want it to export at the size that it is. So here under size, I have it set to document size. And then it shows me in pixels what that would be. Document frame rate. So right now it's 30 frames per second. We could change that if we need to. I'm gonna not mess with it because I don't want to be inventing problems right now. We wanted to export all these frames, so I'm just gonna click render. And that was it. It did it already. It's done. So again, this was chosen from the menu, the panel menu for the timeline. So this timeline was found by going to the window menu and opening timeline. So it's a panel just like the layers panel is a panel. So in the panel menu, there's an option that says render video, and that's how we got here. All right, next we're going to render this or save this as a GIF. So to do that, and there's more than one way to do it, but this is my favorite way. We're going to choose File, Export, and I'm going to choose Save for Web Legacy. And it takes a minute. Okay, here we go. So this scary looking interface is not not as scary as it looks. So here is where we set the file format. So I think by default it's going to come up with like JPEG or something. So you want to make sure you set it to GIF. I would like not worry too much about this stuff. However, here's where we can um finesse this a little bit if we need to. So GIFs as a file format, they are capable of 256 colors at maximum. So that sounds, I guess, like a lot, but when you consider that there's like the RGB color space has 16 point something million colors, 256 is not a lot, but you can see that it looks fine. So it actually is not a problem. But what I like about this workspace is that we can see what these settings are. We can also see down here how big this file is. So this little 800 pixel 2-second animated GIF is 15 megs. So that's pretty big. So if we want to get that file size down, like I know for my email, I think it had to be under 10 megs. So here's how I did that. My first step is to come over here where we can actually change the size of this on the fly. So instead of 800 pixels, I'm going to type 600. And now it's reprocessing. There we go. And look at that. Now it's 9 point something megs. So we just shaved off 5 megs by just dropping it from 800 pixels to 600 pixels, which is pretty great. So I would just leave it. But another option, if you're still like not making the cut, you can also come up here to colors, and believe it or not, you can get away sometimes with lower. So I'm going to go to the next option down just to show you, and I'm going to choose 128, and it's going to render it. And like, look at the preview. I don't know that we really lost a lot for an email anyway. Um, so, that is another option. And now the size is under 8 megs. So it's a combination of the image size and the colors. So I'm going to go back to 256 because we can. I don't know that it really benefits us a whole lot, but I love this interface for that reason. So you can like cook up your GIF file the way you want, and you can keep an eye on the file size. And lastly, we want to make sure the looping animation option is set to forever. And then we can even preview it right here if we want. So we can confirm that it's looking good. And it does. And now here's the thing. If you click done, you have set your parameters, but not actually saved your file. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. So before we do that, we want to click save, and we'll put it here, and we'll call it like, I already have one in here, so I'll call it live. And then it will automatically close. So make sure you click save, not just done. And then if we go to bridge here is the MP4. So this opens, for me, this opens in QuickTime Player. And now if I hit play, it will play through. And it stops after 2 seconds because it's an MP4 and it's in QuickTime. But if I go to the GIF, oh, I can't preview that in bridge. I forgot. But really, that seems weird. But here's our GIF. Oh, I can view it, I think, in Finder. Let me try that. That's weird. There it is. So there's the GIF, and it's tiny, and I love it. And this is so much fun. And I hope you guys are loving it and have loved it. And let's pop in the chat and see what everyone's saying. Look at you guys answering each other's questions. I love it. How would you make, yes, so here was the question Brian had. How would you make the snow fall slower? In that case, you would want less distance, or instead of a 2-second animation, maybe you go with a 5-second animation. And then the snow would be covering the same distance, but instead of doing it in 2 seconds, it would do it in 5, so that would slow it down. It is kind of a trippy thing to think through. And yeah, if you want to change speed, your only options are to change time or distance. Hopefully that makes sense. Deb says she loves this. I'm so glad. I love that you love it. Janice says, brilliant. Will add to all my Christmas cards. So thank you. That's so fun. Yeah, if you're sending out, well, if you're printing them, if you find a way to animate the snow and a print, that would be really, that would be amazing. Then definitely let us know. You could add the snow to a printed photo, or of course, if you were sending like a animated, like an email news or holiday card or whatever, then yeah, you could drop a GIF in it and that would be great. This is so fun, you guys. I'm so grateful that you're here. Uh, Ada says, this is my first time here and I'm absolutely delighted. I hope I said your name right, Ada. Uh, I will be back for sure. Well, thank you. I'm delighted that you're delighted. I'm delighted you're all here. This has been so fun. And I think we're going to wrap it up and leave it here for now. But I wish you all happy, merry everything for all of this season. And this has been fun. And as always, I look forward to next time. And you can always, leave a comment or send a message, an email, whatever, and let me know what you might like to see covered in an upcoming live stream. We do these every month, and it's always a royal treat. So thank you so much, everyone. Be safe and be well, and I will see you next year. Bye.